kind of overview what we're looking at. How taxes are calculated. Tax changes for 2024. Every year the brackets change somewhat. The capital gains, dividends, tools that we can use. Secure Act 2.0, I mentioned, RMD changes. RMD being required minimum distributions, right? So some of the age bands have changed from that we'll look at. Tax deadlines of what to look at as far as filing taxes, extensions, estimates, things we'll look at from there. Roth conversion opportunities that we'll talk about, and that's really just maxing out your bracket. We'll have some examples here. Healthcare laws, gift tax, charitable giving, that's a big question we get as well. And kind of ways to keep some more money in your pocket than versus giving it to Uncle Sam, right? So overall, that's what we're going to touch on. All right, so we'll kind of keep it elementary here, but it's good stuff to know. So how taxes are calculated, right? So when you look at your gross income, it's the sum of all income from all these different sources. So you got your salary from work, your W-2, or 1099 if you're a contract worker, bonuses, investment income, pensions if you're retired and you're lucky enough to get a pension. That obviously comes through every single year as income, gross income. Retirement distributions, if you take money out from a 401k or a pre-tax IRA, you're going to get a 1099 saying that's taxable income for the year, right? So a lot of the other questions we get is gifts, inheritance. Like gift tax is not really people think, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm going to have to pay taxes, or the family member I gave money to is going to have to pay taxes. That's not necessarily. It gets tracked potentially if it's over a certain limit, but it doesn't really negatively impact you in the long run. Workers' compensation, if there's any certain payments from like a lawsuit if you were receiving from a health incident. I mean, again, some of that stuff's not really taxable. Disability benefits from military, obviously, there's some things there that aren't taxable. So there's some things that really don't go into this calculation. So we got your big number, right? And then we've got to start whittling away, right? That's what the CPAs do. They take a look at your situation. All right, how can we make this smaller potentially? So when you reduce your taxable income, you get deductions, and the biggest thing most people look at is your standard deduction. Again, we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but standard deduction is if you don't have enough itemized, right? Since the standard deduction doubled in 2018, a lot of people don't itemize anymore, right? Or especially in retirement, if you've got your house paid off, there's not a lot of mortgage, the kids fall off, and then there's not a lot of deductions or credits that you can get, right? So the standard deduction usually overwhelms, is the better option for everybody to take because it's so high. But again, we'll look at those figures. Potentially, you can, with itemized expenses, moving expenses, if you did that, retirement plan contributions, again, anytime you put money in a pre-tax account, that can help you in the current year, right? So most of Americans have their money in pre-tax accounts. Theoretically, not all that money's yours, right? Because some of it's the government's money, because when you put that money in, you got a deduction on that year of your taxes, right? So you can theoretically never pay tax on that money. That grows tax deferred, you pull it out, and you got to pay tax on those funds. So some people are like, man, I get eaten up a lot of taxes, but you got to remember, I got the deduction way back when I put it in, right? So think about that when retirement contributions come into play and you pull money out, a portion of that's going to go to the government, right? Depending on your bracket. We'll talk a little to continue on the calculation side, the deductions on that. Again, as we mentioned, the standard deduction is really probably going to be what the majority of Americans use. When it comes to that, you gotta give away or have enough itemized deductions to be greater than your standard deduction for that to take place. And again, most people, the vast majority of people, aren't able to do the itemization. But again, itemized deductions that you look at, potential state and local taxes, medical expenses. Again, there's rules around that. Charitable contributions, mortgage interest is obviously a big one people used to use when they had a lot of mortgage interest to deduct potentially, and then some type of professional expenses if that applies to you. Credits are going to be got a little more meat on the bones, right? So it reduces the tax liability dollar for dollar, so to speak. If you do energy credits, if you put solar panels on the house, you buy an electric car, there's certain maybe presidents have put out there to say, hey, if you do this, Congress will pass these rules to say, if you do this, then we'll give you a credit. And those are pretty strong, but you got to be able to qualify and follow specific rules when it comes to that. But credits could be an option for you too, depending on what you go. But I'd say electric cars and stuff like that, and solar panels. Probably will hear a lot, but just weigh it all out when you look at it. It could help you on your taxes. No. All right. So these are a couple different. There's a lot of things changed. Some of it doesn't apply to a lot of people in this room. Some of it will. But the number one that we've got here is Secure Act 2.0. So effective in January. The first bullet point, I'll spend a little more time on than the rest of these because it's talking about 529 accounts. So 529 accounts are educational accounts, right? So you put them in place for your kids, your grandkids, and hopefully you started early, you put money in, that money grows and grows and grows. You don't get a tax incentive for put money in, but the deal is if you have it in there long enough, any growth that you have in that 529 and you use it for qualified educational expenses, then you won't pay tax on that gain if they pull it out and they use it for room and board, tuition, computer, books, whatever it might be, right? So you got to have it for a long period of time to really get the tax benefit out of it. Well, some people, when they're, especially if they just have a newborn and they're like, well, what do? We want to start trying to save early for education, but heck, what are schools going to look like in 18, 19 years from now, right? When they potentially will go. What's education going to look like? I don't know. If I put money in these things, they don't go to school, what happens, right? So there's a lot of kind of unknowns there that's maybe some people could shy away from 529. So I think it potentially might be good to have a combination of 529s and other savings for that reason. But the Secure Act really came out with a really neat option here. So what it says is that if somebody goes to school or they don't go to school or whatever the case may be, they have a 529 sitting there, you can always move it to other beneficiaries, right? Other brothers, sisters, cousins, whatever. But if that's all done and it's satisfied and they have money left over, the IRS is allowing them to move money into a Roth IRA. So it's kind of crazy because if you think about it, you don't get the growth is not taxed, right? If you use it for education, that's the power of a 529. But if they're allowing you to take that money and put it in a Roth is money that grows tax free, right? So it's really doesn't really make sense why the government. This is bad for the government in a way. So I'm kind of scratching my head like, why did they do this, right? But because they're never going to pay tax on that money. But they're allowing the beneficiaries, as long as you've had the account for 15 years, so that's going to cut a lot of people out, right? A lot of people kind of drag their feet in setting this thing up. So it's even more important to way if you do have a younger person, child or grandchild or whatever, at least start the clock. Open the account, and I say start that clock. Well, even if you put $50 in it, you don't have to continually contribute to it. But at least that gets the clock started for this 15-year time frame. If they did that for 15 years, they can take up to $35,000 as a lifetime amount and put it in a Roth IRA, and that's a huge, massively head start for anybody, in their early 20s potentially if they're out of college or didn't go to college to have a head start on retirement, right? So 35,000 you can put up. It's up to the they have to have earned income to be able to put into it. $7,000 is the max they can put in. Every year that's going to change. But for right now, they say the overall maximum is $35,000. So again, it's a really neat option. So you're not stuck holding the bag on a 529 if you're not using it for educational expenses. Is that any questions on that? And that's a new thing. Some of this stuff will change. We'll get more guidance. There's still some questions out there that I've got, but the government likes to pass laws and they don't give you any ideas on how it works until like a year or two later. So go ahead.
Yep. So that's interesting. Is it just for the beneficiary or can it be for the owner of the account, 529? How does that distinguish there?
Well, that was kind of one of my questions too. When I started thinking about this, is that because you can do 529s, you can move it to other beneficiaries, right? So if child A had this thing for 15 plus years, and then they transition it to brother or sister or parent, because parent can get it too, does that 15 rule carry over to with the transfer of that's a big question. That's an unknown. Again, they pass these things and then they give you guidance a year or two later. So I don't know that. We don't know that answer yet because IRS hasn't weighed in on it, right? So, but yeah, I mean, that would be pretty neat if that was the case, right? So, answer, we don't know, potentially. But yeah, I would love to see that too. Get that answer. Maybe we will one day. But great question, because that's where my mind immediately went to. Any other questions on that part, 529s? Yeah, North Carolina used to give you a credit on your state taxes, but that was like over a decade ago. They don't. That's probably been longer than that, but they don't do that anymore, unfortunately.
And that's a good point, because we've worked with other folks on 529s in other states, Georgia being one of them. You know, we can't help you with the Georgia plan. It needs to be direct with the state of Georgia, because you get that state level tax deduction, which is a pretty good advantage of the money immediately back into your pocket. So regardless of what state it is, you can use any state you want to. But you gotta remember the tax treatment of that is the state you live in, not the one that you're getting, the state you live in. So this client happened to be in Georgia, so they were able to get your tax benefits associated with that. But yeah, you can use all 50 states. You can go to any state you want to as far as the 529 plan. My son and my daughter, son has state of Virginia, daughter has state of Alaska. But yeah, matter of fact, we just looked at a plan the other day that was state of South Dakota. So they're all over the place.
Yeah, every state has their own. So. And the only difference is who's the custodian that you have to invest the money in over time. That's really what it comes down to. The age to start taking RMDs increased from 73 to 73. So again, before it was 70 and a half forever, right? I'm so glad the IRS got rid of this half thing. I don't know why they did that. It just confuses people. Math is hard, right? So it's just like 70 and a half. Why do they do that? So that's changed to 73, and then it does continue to push out to age 75 in 2033. So that's a change, right? So a lot of people are, if you're not 73 yet, you don't have to, unless you already turned. If you're over that and you've taken it 70, you've got to continue doing that. But so for some people, you're landing right in that sweet spot that you can delay to 73, depending on your age, could be up to 75. So they're pushing that out.
And like Brandon had mentioned before, this is one that you kind of scratch your head on too, because it's better because it allows you to defer your income longer, but the government's not getting their revenue. So they did us a favor. We'll take it.
Next couple bullet points here. Again, there's going to be different changes to 401k platforms where employers are able to potentially match on student loan payments that people pay or put money towards their student loans. There's a kind of a hardship of $1,000 they can potentially take out, and they self-approve it. And so again, some different things in the 401k space that could be beneficial as well to some people. But again, it's just allowing people to have a little more access when life comes up, right? Again, here's some of the important dates. So again, January 31st, 2024 is the due date for the employees to send W-2s, right? Everybody getting W-2s, 1099s in the mail now, right? Right? They're loading up. So hopefully they only have to theoretically get them out. I think Fidelity, just looking at people's Fidelity counts for 1099s, a lot of those have been available maybe 18th or 19th, and they're starting to mail those out. So you should get the Fidelity ones pretty soon. If you don't get it, you can always get it online. If you still can't figure that out, come to us. We can potentially look at it and print it out for you. But yeah, definitely, it should come in the mail. That's how we have everything set up. Well, that's one thing we want to come in the mail. And then secondly, you can always go online and get it. So that's key. So you're going to see all this come flooding in.
But for margin of safety, don't prepare your taxes before mid-February, because you're going to have 1099s that may lag. So if you prep your taxes prior to that, you may find yourself going back and filing an amendment. So just be careful with that. I know a lot of individuals want to get their taxes done as soon as possible, and that's great. But just be patient if you've got investment accounts. Mid-February at the earliest is what I would look at for tax preparation.
Another thing about that is, we'll talk about QCDs in here a little bit, qualified charitable distributions, but the people who did do that in 2023, we'll define that here in a little bit. You'll get a 1099 and they're not your QCD might be in that distribution. So when you file your taxes with the CPA or you do them yourself, there's going to be an option there to say, hey, I sent X dollars as a qualified charitable distribution to a nonprofit, a church, whatever, any type of nonprofit that you did. And we'll define that here in a little bit. So people who did that in 2023 know all about it. But again, you've got to tell your CPA because they're going to just get the 1099 and see a distribution and go. But you can say, no, I took maybe $20,000 out of my IRA account, but 5 of that went to my church as a QCD. So you have to tell them because they will not know that because the 1099 is not coded that way. Okay. Fidelity basically says, or not just Fidelity, all the custodians out there, they don't want that on them to say that that's the case. So QCD, if you did them, tell your tax preparer what it is and how much. April 15th obviously is going to be your tax day. Everybody knows that day. April 15th or October 15th is the deadline to do any extensions. If you did file an extension, can't get things together. Maybe you got business income that's just not ready yet. You got to file an extension. And if you do that, then your tax returns are due by October 15th. December 31st, that's going to be always when your RMDs or your required minimum distributions are needed to be have exited your account by December 31st of 2024 to satisfy your 2024 RMD. So we do a good job of doing that. Heather really heads that up for us, and that's a massive undertaking. So she does real good to try to make sure everybody takes their RMD when you're supposed to. Brackets. Okay, so these are the brackets. So we got single, married, filing jointly up here. That's basically where most everybody falls. So again, every year these brackets kind of increase, right? So when you look at, and this is a progressive system. Again, this is something I go over with a lot of people of all ages, just to understand how the taxes work, right? So it's a progressive system. So again, I always say, picture a graduated cylinder. You got to fill it up with water. Well, as you fill it up, you're paying taxes at these rates. So everybody goes through these brackets. Some, are pretty quick. Will brackets really ratchet up through your income earner will go straight up through these brackets real quick. Some will gradually go up through the year as you make income. So when you first look at it, the 10% is going to be up to $11,600 on single or $23,200. So again, after your standard deduction that we'll define here in a little bit, the $23,200, the next tranche of that income is only taxed at 10. The next is taxed at 12, as you can see the range is there. 22, 24, 32. So again, 12 jumps to the 22. That's the biggest jump in the tax code, right? 10%. So again, most people are in that, most Americans are going to be in that 12% deal. But if you go after 12, it jumps to 22. Then you go on from there. There's some people that's based on their lifestyle, they're always going to stay in the 12. They're always going to stay in the 22 or 24, whatever it might be. But this is where kind of Roth conversions come into play too, that we'll talk about. And we really put some numbers together and show you what that looks like. So it's just important to know it's a progressive system. There's an effective rate, and there's your effective rate that you pay and your marginal rate, right? So your marginal rate is where your last dollar falls. So say if you're a couple married filing jointly, you make $150,000 in income, right? Well, your marginal rate is going to be the 22%, right? Because that's where the 22 kind of falls into that range there of 150. Well, not all of your income is taxed at the 22, just that tranche, right? So you're effectively, when you put in your standard deduction, some at 10, some at 12, and then some at 22, typically your probably effective rate could be someone take your marginal -6, and that's kind of where you sometimes stand, right? Kind of just a rule of thumb to look at. So instead of your marginal rate being at 24, or 22, maybe you're at 16 effectively, right? So that's how much you're paying on average for the brackets. So that's a big piece a lot of people miss. They feel like if they make $1 more, all my income is going to be taxed at 22. No, that's not the case. So that's another positive, right? So that's good. The IRS didn't get us there either. But anyway, brackets are very important to understand. Again, these always get adjusted every single year.
Well, and the other thing I was going to add to that, those adjustments from last year to this year were pretty significant. So it's really going to help you out when you file for 24. So it's come up quite a bit. So definitely you'll get some help in regards to maintaining longer in that 12% bracket before you dip over into the 22.
And this is we're talking about capital gains and dividends here. So this is all money that's not IRA money, right? So if you got a 401k, traditional IRA, Roth IRA, whatever it might be, those are retirement dollars. And the tax situation is different there. But this is money that, say, if you had a brokerage account that you've been saving into, and you've got a highly appreciated stock in there, and then you got short-term and long-term capital gains rates, right? So short-term right here is going to be defined as asset you held for less than a year. So again, you buy a stock, you buy Apple, you hold it for 3 months, and you sell it, you made money off of it. Well, that gain is calculated, not what you bought, but that's your cost, right? Whatever it made is what you're taxed on. If you held it for a short-term gain, then it's taxed at your brackets that we just looked at, right? If it's a long-term gain, then it depends on where your income brackets are. And then it'll go transition to, if you held it for over at least 1 year, 1 day, typically long-term capital gain treatment's there. Could be 0, could be 15, and the most it is 20, right? So therefore, again, we get a lot of questions as where should I take account money out, right? Well, depends, right? If your income is at a certain level, if say you're in the 12, 15 bracket, and then your long-term capital gains might be 15, so there's really not a ton of difference, right? I'd say people that maybe go through the highest brackets, if they're in the 37 plus tax bracket, well, their long-term capital gains rate would be 20. 20 is lower than 37, right? So it kind of depends on your income and what you're looking at to see what makes the most sense. This is also, I said stocks, but also a lot of the times we see it was with real estate, right? Real estate's the same way. They can have long-term and short-term capital gains rates. So again, that's a big question too of how that works. But again, separate from IRA money, this is just again non-IRA type money. All right. So again, different ones for single, married, filing jointly, 0, 15, 20. So again, there's some cases that if somebody just lives on Social Security, which is very hard to do these days, right? But if someone's like that, there's a potential they could be at the 0% capital gains rate and pay nothing on their gains, right? That's pretty neat. 15's decent too. This is all federal. State of North Carolina's gonna get their hands in it too, right? That's another 5% you gotta put on it. They don't worry about these marginal rates and stuff like that. North Carolina is just a flat tax, 5%. Retirement plan limits, again, something else that changes. The contributions do change every year or two, kind of rolling every 2 years, it'll change. So 6,500 used to be a contribution limit, now it jumped up to 7,000. If you're over age 50, you can do a $1,000 catch up. So again, this is going to be your IRA contributions. This will be a combination between IRA and Roth. That's another question we get. Well, can I put 7,000 in my traditional and put another 7,000 in my Roth? No, you can't, unfortunately. It's 7,000 between the two, okay? So it depends on which way you want to go. As your tax situation, that's what you need to stay under is 7,000. There's a bunch of other rules outside of that. If you do a Roth contribution, there's a phase out range, right? So if you see the second bucket over here that we talk about, married filing jointly, if your income's over 230,000 but under 240,000, then you might potentially make a partial contribution. If your income's over 240 as a household, you make too much money to put money in a Roth. Okay? Now, let's take a step to the side. There's exceptions to every single rule, right? So Roth 401ks, if you're working, there are no income limits in a Roth 401k. So you could funnel money into a Roth 401k if that's something available to you. There are no income limits. These are contributory, right? Then you go down to the next box down here, the phase out range for deductible IRA contribution. So again, traditional IRAs, there's also income ranges to say, can you take a deduction on what I put in? Again, if you're married filing jointly and you make over $143,000 a year, then you make too much money to get that deduction. There could be some workarounds to this rule, but theoretically, the IRS says you can't put money in, and you make too much, you can't get a deduction. So you're like, dang, can't do that either. So then sometimes those people, all they have an option to is open up a separate brokerage account just to save extra money outside of IRA buckets, right? So it's a big deal. 401ks at the bottom, again, 23,000. And then again, it's another, 6,000 catch up, I believe. 7,500 catch up for if you're over age 50. So again, pretty high limits in 401k plans too, from that end.
The other thing I'll add to that, at one time, there was a limitation to where you couldn't contribute to IRAs anymore. Once you get 70 and a half, that is now gone. As long as you got earned income, you can contribute to an IRA. That's up to you. But does it make tax sense? I don't know. That's something we would have to take a look at to make sure that it makes sense. It may be better just to take the income and move on. But income limitations, age limitations are no longer an issue.
So this is talking about, you can see over the years, we got from 2021 all the way down to now. So basically this is Social Security wages, right? So this is something that if you make under a certain income, then your Social Security tax is deducted. In 2024, if someone makes over $168,000 a year, Social Security no longer takes money out of their paycheck, right? So somebody makes $1 million a year, they're only paying Social Security out of 168 grand of that, right? This is something that's always been on the table and will probably change at some point. This could really help fund Social Security down the road. 2030 potentially is when Congress is going to have to take action on Social Security, right? So one of the things that could be on the table is they could increase this. Some presidents come in and said, "Hey, let's take that up to 400,000," right? Well, then up to $400,000 people's income would be putting money into Social Security. So if they increase that number, that could help Social Security out tremendously. They push out their full retirement age, that could help as well. But again, they're not going to do anything about it until they have to. So 2030-ish might be the time where you'll see action taken on Social Security. It will be there in some shape or form. It's not going to go away. They might make some changes and grandfather people in. That's typically what the IRS does. But a lot of people are scared, I don't know, my Social Security's going to go away, or I don't want to count on that. Like, it will be there. This country usually gives people stuff and then hardly ever takes it away, right? So we're not going to change it. A lot of people, that's all they have to live on. That's going to put even more stress on the system, if Social Security payments get stopped, right? Same thing with the government shutdown fiascos that always come up. It just tears my nerves up because people say, they're going to stop your Social Security. It's that president's fault because they can't do it. No, they're not. They're not going to do it. That'd be a world of hurt, right? So it's just, that's fear mongering that get people all riled up. So Social Security changes are definitely here, but that's how that's funded, right? So Social Security is mainly funded by the current workers.
The other thing, we'll have questions about, what am I paying truly in taxes? Well, if you're below that 168.6 this year, you got to remember, if you're working for someone else, you're paying an additional 7.65%. So that's going to be the Social Security, Medicare. It's all going to be taken out of your check. Your employer pays the other half. But if you're self-employed, you got to pay out 15.3. So if you're self-employed, let's say you're doing well, you can pay 37.5 plus the 15.3. That's it. So that's why you'll see a lot of self-employed individuals, higher earners. They'll earn up to $168,600, and then they stop their W-2 income. They shut it down. And then what happens is you'll have distributions that they'll take from the company, or so-called dividends, because they no longer have to pay that 15.3. So it's a benefit from that standpoint. That's not necessarily true. You still got to pay the 2.9 on the Medicare, but you would avoid the other 12 something as far as the math is concerned. So there's advantages for high income earners to take a look at that strategy.
R&D rule changes, an inherited IRA changes, that people get. So if you inherit an IRA account from a mom or dad, you got to deplete that thing within 10 years now, right? Which that's one thing the government is speeding up because they want their tax revenue and they don't want wealth passing from generation to the next. You used to be able to stretch that money out over a lifetime, but now they want you to deplete it within 10 years. So it's kind of changing the mindset about people like, should I really have all this money sitting pre-tax, right? Look at the Roth account we talked about, traditional we just talked about, 401ks. Again, you have Roth and pre-tax options within the 401k space. 403b, SEP IRAs, simple IRAs. These are going to be other retirement accounts if you're a small business. Small businesses, a lot, instead of having 401ks, it can be very expensive to monitor and set up. Simple plans is a very easy way to give employees an option. If they have 100 employees or less, you can have a simple plan as a business owner. That's a really good option to have out there if you don't want to step in the big world of 401k. SEP IRA, usually only seeing if you're a sole proprietor, if you're the only person. But again, there's some options there. 403b, 457, 401a. These are all just different IRS labels for these types of accounts. Then you go to the second one, we talk about your health side of the equation, your flexible spending accounts, your health reimbursement accounts, and then your health savings accounts. So these are all different options you can do. HSA, you gotta have a high deductible health plan to be able to contribute to one of these things. If you have that, then you can put money back and you do get a tax deduction on that. So there's an example there, $38.50 for a individual, $77.50 for a family. So that's another way you could potentially reduce your tax liability if that's something you want to do. Next, we'll look at, in the final column over here is the life insurance. So again, life insurance is a beautiful thing. It's tax-free, right? So life insurance can have a death benefit, payouts out to beneficiaries tax-free. So a lot of people can say, hey, let's spend down these IRA assets. Let's pay the tax now, set up a life insurance in place, pay the premiums from an IRA, and then pass on a tax-free death benefit to beneficiaries. Because if you inherit money, what do you want? Do you want money that's going to be taxed at whatever rates are in the future, or do you want tax-free? Raise your hand if you like tax-free. Yeah, all right. You are listening to something today. All right. So tax-free is awesome. So that's a good way and a massive tax strategy to leave money behind. Again, just all we're trying to do is leave less money to the government. I'd rather my family get it versus the government, right? That's a simple way to put it.
And that's one main strategy that we utilize in regards to looking at qualified funds. If we've got an individual that really doesn't need the distributions from the IRA, we're going to try to figure out how we can get that to the next generation tax-free. And the life insurance strategy called pension maximization is probably one of the best things you can apply. It doesn't work for everybody, but for those that it does work for, it's extremely powerful. So it's definitely a strategy that you can utilize.
Annuities can also be used for multiple things. We can use them as a risk protection vehicle, but also if you're using a non-IRA account, the annuities initially kind of came out as a tax-deferred savings account, right? So you put money in, taxes are deferred until you pull it out, right? So that, again, this is non-IRA money I'm talking about there, so you can help taxes out then. Again, the whole theory behind that is if you want to defer taxes to a later date when you think you might be in a lower bracket, you could use an annuity product to do that. So when we click on this thing, this takes us to a live look at our national debt, right? This is a really cool chart, isn't it? So a lot of stuff's going on here, but what's up here in the corner is your national debt, right? 34 million, no, not million, billion, no, not trillion. Oh yeah, with a T, right? How many zeros is that? Yeah. So 34 trillion in debt and climbing, right? So this is a really scary chart to look at, but it takes a look at where we are for our national debt. Breaks it down. I mean, there's a ton of stuff here that you can look at. You can look at different countries all over the world to kind of see how we look. The time machine portion, that's the world debt clocks. Time machine portion is really cool because you can go back and see where was it at certain points in time, which is so you can see how fast it's grown, right? So again, there's a lot of countries out there. We're not the only one that have this problem. Well, the good part about it, we own how much of our own debt do you think? I'm gonna make this interactive. How much of that debt, percentage-wise, do we own? The U.S. us.
Of the 34 trillion, how much do we own of our own debt?
45.
45%. Yeah, percent. Yeah. Do the percent. It's easy.
50%. I heard 50. Any other takers?
You got lunch. It's 65%. So we own 65% of our own debt, right?
And China owns
China does not own the rest. It's not China. Who do you think owns the next tranche? No.
That's a good guess.
It's Japan.
China owns 4%. So do the math. 34 trillion. If China owns 4%, they own about 1.4 trillion of our debt. And I hear people all the time, China's taking us over. Nah, it's not a big deal in the whole scheme of things. When Brandon and I have this conversation all the time, if we wanted to get rid of that debt, since we own 65%, and I saw this interview, I think I mentioned this before on 60 Minutes, where they had Jerome Powell on there creating all this money digitally. But they're creating all the money digitally, why can't you just hit the delete key? I'm just throwing it out there. But we own 65% of that 34 trillion. So believe me, the government is behind the scenes. They know this. They know it. What does that mean? Your guess is as good as mine. But
What's Japan's percent?
6%. Being on 6%. But they're an ally. They're not gonna put any pressure on us. They like us.
1960, these are the brackets. 1960. The lowest is 26%, the highest was 87. Heck, why those people even work? You know? 87%. Again, one of my favorite statistics or stories was Ronald Reagan. Like when he was an actor, he would only make one movie a year, or 2 movies a year, I think it was. Because after the third movie, I think like 90% of it went to the government. So he was like, so he'd retire the rest of the year, go to his ranch and hang out. Right? So it makes sense. You understood the brackets. So you look at 2017. So 2017, here's the brackets. We got 2017 up there, 2024. Where's the future, right? Who knows? Can we revert back to 60? Maybe we can. The theory of what we're making is in 2017, when Trump was in office, he had enough votes, he changed the tax code in 2018. That money, or the tax codes changed to the 12, to the 10, 12, 22, 24. That's when those brackets changed then. That is are set to expire January 1, 2026 under current law, unless Congress changes that and they get enough votes. And then after January 1, 2026, it reverts back to 2017 rates. So your brackets right now, as the law stands, are going up, period. Right? So these brackets are going to take back over in 2026. Now the income is going to be adjusted for inflation, but again, that's an increase, right? 12 is going to go to 15, the 22 to 25, the 24 to 28, right? So here's my example of if you're in the 22 now, why not convert up through the 24? Because it's going to go to 25. So you still keep 1% in your pocket. You still win, right? Historically low tax rates where we're at right now, so take advantage of it while we can. The difference between Roth and traditional, right? People somewhat have a grasp on it, but let's talk about it. Roth money, right? So you put money in. You do not get a tax deduction the current year you make the contribution, right? You're funding that with after-tax money. So again, if you take $5,000, put it in a Roth, that $5,000 grows tax-free. Because think about it, you got paid, you earn money from your work or whatever. You have to have earned income to put money in. W-2 or 1099 income. You can't take money out of a pension or IRA and then put money in. That's not earned income, right? So you got to have earned income to make a contribution first. That money, you get paid, it hits your paycheck, and then your paycheck goes to your bank account. You turn around, take that $5,000, put it in a Roth. No tax deduction for the contribution, but that money grows tax-free, and you pull it out in retirement tax-free, so the growth is not taxed. Okay? So people do that if they're in a lower tax bracket. Makes sense, or if just tax rates are low, which they are right now. We'll talk about some comparisons of that historically. Pre-tax money, same deal. You put $5,000 in, that's going to lower your taxable income by $5,000, and the year you make the contribution. That money grows to what they call tax deferred. You pull it out in retirement down the road at whatever tax rates are then, and you pay tax on 100% of what you put in way back when, what it's grown to, and then you pay taxes of whatever tax rates are in the future, right? So that's the difference between the two. So it kind of really depends on where your income is and which way you should, which funding vehicle you should use. So we bring that up not to make you scared, but the reason for it is talking about tax rates, right? That's a big problem. What's the easiest way for them to pay that debt down?
Increased tax.
Increase taxes. There you go. Right. So that's where you come down to the Roth conversion strategies and why it makes sense. Because right now we're in historically low levels as far as your tax rates are concerned. So we talk about potential Roth conversions. Well, again, we'll talk about some other things here. So this is basically when we do this, you pay your tax now. You're going to have to pay the tax, right? Somebody's paying the tax. You're going to pay it. Your family's going to pay it down the road. We're just trying to utilize the lowest tax bracket to pay that tax, right?
And they don't want to help IRS.
What's that?
They don't want to help IRS at all.
No, we don't. No, we don't want to do that. So again, taxpayer, we do Roth conversions, a lot of different things. Tax-free, right? Tax-free. This is another bucket for tax-free. Roth conversion, you're basically taking the appropriate amount and converting it over from a pre-tax and you got to pay your tax and move it to your traditional. So, due to time, I want to get to this example. Here we go. So here's an example of what we're talking about. So married filing jointly couple can make $94,300 in income. That's the top of your 12 bracket. Remember, well, that's what it is. Plus $29,200. That's going to be your standard deduction. So if you add those two together, that's $123,500. You can show that much income and still pay taxes at 12% federal. Okay? So pretty strong. So if somebody's making 100, for instance, convert 20 of it, still pay 12% on that money and convert it to a Roth. Right? Question?
When you say earned income, are you talking about taxable or your actual income? Taxable.
It's taxable income, yeah, because there's an AGI, modified adjusted gross income, gross income, provisional income. There's all these different items out there. So so if you put money into like a 401k there or whatnot, or pre-tax account, that can lower your income amount, right? So it kind of can get you under this threshold. If you're over 65, they give you extra kickers. If people are over 65, if a married couple or both of them are over, they get an extra 100 to 126,600 is your number. So again, there's different levels. If you go to the 22, some people say, I'm stuck in the 22 because I got my lifestyle strong, I got a good pension coming in, Social Security, distribution from my accounts. There's no way I'm coming out of the 22 bracket. Well, once you're in the 22, what's the next step after 22? 24, right? Well, what the heck? What's 2% more in taxes, right? So again, it could potentially to really convert massive amounts of money. You could go all the way up through the 24 bracket. So again, it's just going to depend on your individual situation and really what makes the most sense. We're all about paying tax now because we're still at historical low levels, right? I'd say if you're in the 37, 32 plus tax bracket, then yeah, you probably want to do as much as you can to tax defer. So again, just something to think about when you look at different tax strategies. Disadvantage of Roth conversions, again, you got to keep this in mind. This could, if we drive your income way up, this could affect your Part B premiums. That's a big deal. If you make so much income, you can potentially, your Part B medical premiums at age 65 and beyond can be looked at. So they're all calculated on 2 years of your 2 years ago tax return, right? So that's, if you did a lot of conversions, you got to keep, so someone that's like 63, we got to be aware of that. If we do conversions now, then at 65, it could cause your Part B to be impacted, which is your medical insurance, right, for the doctor's offices. So it could go, right now, it's 0 to 10, it would depend on your bracket. It's $174 a month. It's deducted out of your Social Security if you started it. And if you go up, it's $244, and then you can just see all the brackets and bands there. Your Part B, if you're over 500, over the 397 married filing joint, could be $594 a month. That's kind of crazy. That'd be for the full year, right? So you got to keep that in mind when we do conversions.
And that's what Brandon's talking about. If you've got appreciated stock and you want to take capital gains, or if we want to do those Roth conversions up to that level, we got to be careful because you're going to get surprised. And it's going to be on the Part B side of the Medicare side of the equation. And if you'll look at these joint tax return levels, 206 only goes to 258. You see how tight those are? It doesn't take long to get through those levels, especially if you sell a piece of real estate or something. It'll get there fast. So you just got to be aware of what's going to be impacted.
There is a form that's happening to somebody if they retire or they have severance. And you want to dispute this with the government. There's a form you can fill out, but I've only got it to work when somebody has a severance package, right? Somebody has a severance package and gets a big chunk of money because they lost their job. Then that is something that IRS can say, hey, you're good. You're back to the limits. We'll back to the 174. You're not have to pay the higher amount. Otherwise, if you sell a piece of property, that's not a reason. IRS is not going to feel sorry for you because you made a big profit on a sale of land. Okay, so Medicare, Social Security is not going to do that. So there are certain things you can potentially ask them to say, recalculate this. Gift tax, all right, here's the gifting rules, right? So gift tax, you can see them over the years, 22, 23, 24, $13.6 million per person. So a lot of people ask us, I'm not having a state tax problem? I don't know, you got over 13.6 million if you're married, you got 27, or excuse me, that's not right.
27.2.
Yeah, 27.2. You don't have to come talk to me if you got over $27.2 million after this. I'll be outside. Come see me. You don't have to raise your hand now. I get it. But yeah, you don't have an estate tax problem if that's the case, right? If you give money away above and beyond the $18,000 annual gift tax exclusion, so again, $18,000 is per person as well. So if mom wants to give son $18,000, dad can give son $18,000. Dad can then give daughter-in-law $18,000 and give mom can give $18,000. So again, pretty high levels. If you go beyond that, that's okay. You just got to file a gift tax return. When you file a gift tax return, the reason they're having you do that is they're going to deduct it off of your exclusion, your state tax exemption. So they're going to eat up some of that $13 million per person. So again, not a big deal. They're just tracking it.
We had this situation last year. We had a family that gifted right at, it was $4 or $5 million to the kids. But,
That wasn't my parents. It wasn't my parents.
It was my dad.
Yeah, his parents.
But when they gifted it over, I made it a point to make sure I got in contact with the CPA to say, hey, if you file this gift tax return, here's why. And the CPA did a good job. They said, okay, when did you do it? How much did you do? So we needed to make sure that we titled everything right so they filed it properly to let the IRS know. It doesn't cost anything. You've got up to that 13.6 million that you can give away if you want to. All you're doing is saying, hey, IRS, I'm gonna use 4 million of my 13.6 million. Now I've got 9.6 million left as far as my state limitations. All they're asking you to do is just let them know. So the $18,000 limit for gifting is a great item. If you said, you know what, I want to give 100, you give 100. We just need to file a gift tax return. So I've got the, yes.
Oh, okay.
Do those numbers automatically drop back like the other tax things, or is that locked in forever?
They're gonna drop back.
Should drop back, which is like half, right?
That's not even half. 5.5.
That does go down.
There's speculation between 3.5 and 5.5, but yes, they're gonna get cut in half. Yeah.
And in the past, they've been super low. So
Yeah, one time it was $675,000, so that was a big problem.
that's when you heard a lot of people pushing trusts and things like that, right? There's Warren Buffett goes back and says, if anybody dies from the state problem, you did poor planning, right? Because there's a ways to avoid this if you're above that. Or if they ever change it, comes back down, and you're above it, then there's proper planning you can avoid. Okay. Another ways that we can look at as far as tax, they're sending money out, it's the annual gifting, which talked about that, Roth IRA beneficiaries, TOD designations. So TODs transfer on death, that's beneficiaries on non-IRA accounts, that's all it is. Life insurance, again, tax-free death benefits, beautiful thing. DAF accounts or donor advised funds. These are normally people that if they sell, maybe they sell a business, they have a chunk of money, they need to lower their tax liability during that year because it's a very high income year. They can take a chunk of money, put it in a donor advised fund, 50, 100 grand, whatever, and that can help their tax liability. That then fund can be invested and you pull money off, and you can just work it like a foundation and give money away as you see fit. So donor advised funds are pretty neat if that's the situation there. Donate appreciated assets. Again, you see this in long-term or the long-term capital gains slide we looked at. If there's somebody has a highly appreciated stock, they can give that stock to charity. They don't have to pay tax on it, and that is their donation. So a lot of people can give stock if that's the case. Again, non-IRA assets. That's a big deal. Qualified charitable distributions is the big one. That's what I talked about before. So again, we talk about these in a lot of these classes, right? QCDs. You give money, if you're age 70 and a half or older, you can give money directly from your IRA account to a charity and not pay taxes. If you're RMD age, you have to take that money out. It satisfies your RMD for that year. So it's a win-win across the board. So typically what we see, a lot of people might give to a church every week, every month from their checking account, right? They're not really getting any tax benefit from it. But if you give it directly from your IRA, you're spending down your pre-tax assets. The charitable place is getting their money up front, potentially for a full year, which can help, right? I worked with somebody with this last week that wanted to potentially give money at the end of the year. I was like, well, a lot of people give money away at the end of the year, right? Just because that's usually when they're more giving and they know what the years look like, and now I got to get some out potentially, right? So a lot of charities have a rougher time in the first half of the year than the second half of the year, right? So they could potentially use your money if that's really what you want to do. So you can give money directly from your IRA. It can't go through you. It's got to come directly from your IRA straight to the charitable 501c3 organization. That's massive. Doesn't hit your tax return. You don't pay tax on it. You're good. It's a win, 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 win.
And I'll tell you how significant that is. A lot of the churches that we work with, this in some cases can represent about 2% of their budget. So if their budget's $300,000 a year, that's what they need to operate. I've seen the numbers be $30,000 coming in from QCDs. And they never forget it. It's always front and center. They want to make sure the congregation understands that you can do this. It's just out of sight, out of mind. People forget about it, that it's available, but it's there.
Is it
So-
adjustable every year? Can you change it from one year to the next, or are you stuck with it?
You can change it whenever you
You
want.
can do $1,000 this year, you can do $500 this year, next year you can do 10,000,
The max is 100,000.
100,000 a year that you can do.
Again, you got to be over 70 and a half, directly from an IRA. It's awesome. Good stuff.